in a Form 1 social science class, there was an activity asking how many grandparents you have. I answered 14. It was an exhaustive list. I meticulously counted all the Mbumbus and all the Tukais my parents told me I had. But to my dismay, the answer was 4. I tried to reason with my teacher, but I was put down. At that early age, I came away with the realization that we travel different worlds.
You say accidental academic, but I think right there were the makings of a sociologist. So while Patrick was arguing to get his 14 grandparents included as part of his family, I made the distinction between friends and acquaintances, something that he thought was incredibly strange and perhaps a little rude. My definition of family was quite different, and our definitions of what constituted closeness were poles apart.
Early on in our relationship, and perhaps because of our academic backgrounds, we chose not to automatically make everything about ethnicity and culture. As Fijians, this was a challenge, but we knew that we would be better off if these weren't our only identity markers.
One of our biggest arguments ever was not about ethnicity or culture. It was work-related, actually over the effectiveness of group work. It became really heated. One person told the other person to get out of their office, and the other person did. So group work, not typically something you would think would cause a huge argument in a cross-cultural marriage.
Instead, we acknowledge how culture shapes us, but we also know that we exercise a lot of free will over who and how we live. And if there are things that don't suit our family or the context in which we live, we learn new ways of doing things and thinking. After all, culture is evolving, and we embrace to make the most of our circumstance and to give our family the best opportunity to thrive.
There's no point struggling to fit societal norms that don't work in a different context to which they were formed. Sometimes they don't even work in the context they were formed. But instead of adapting and evolving, many people keep clinging to a system of beliefs and a set of practices that no longer work for anyone.
This is why academia provides a wonderful home and allows for the opportunity to reflect, grow, and mature. But I accidentally stumbled upon this home. As you've heard in the introduction, I grew up and attended school in Levuka, and the reality was you ended up in one of these places. PEFCO, the tuna cannery in Levuka, the Pacific Regional Seminary, where you would go and train to be a priest, Corpus Christi, the teacher training college, or the police academy. But I had an application that I completed with the help of my careers teacher, was accepted by USP, and I scored the university entrance marks. At that time, your names were printed in the Fiji Times, and I was one of those students admitted to the foundation program. To take up the offer, you had to contact the university, and so I did. But the irony was, I only came to know about universities as these events were unfolding. At USP, I felt very free. I grew my hair into dreadlocks. I didn't even iron my clothes, and I wore what I wanted. I developed liberal ideas and learned how to navigate serious conversations with my parents, particularly about culture and religion. And I used the opportunity to develop my interests in young people. I came to university not knowing what was possible in this space, but today I'm still exploring these possibilities.
So individually and as a couple, we found a sense of belonging in our work. Around the time I was finishing my PhD, we thought we might have a baby. Impatience, coupled with an inkling that something wasn't quite right, I went to the doctors. And eventually I was told that I wouldn't be able to have children, and that if I had managed to conceive, I wouldn't be able to carry my baby to term. I was devastated, because the mum part of Dr. Mum was all I really wanted. Surprisingly enough, we got on with life. Our work continues to be rewarding. As researchers, we were trying to find ways to ensure that the results of our work reached the communities that we worked with, that there was real impact. Our research has helped inform personal projects. So the children's reading room in Levuka was set up as results of research indicated that kids in Fiji didn't have neutral, safe third places to live their childhoods. So I threw myself into my work, not as a distraction, but with a consciousness that it was a real area that I could make an impact. Work is a safe haven for ourselves and Rafa, who I conceived and carried to full term with the slightest complication. So I say it's a safe haven for Rafa because he spends a lot of time at the University of Otago. He attends preschool on campus. He has fluffy dates with Patrick at St. David's Cafe every morning before school. He attends our reading group for Fijian students every Sunday on campus. And his most favorite person is the university proctor, who he has met twice. So he's at home.
Now we have our individual work, the work we pursue together, and the work involved in raising Rafa. We are raising a child of mixed heritage in Dunedin, New Zealand. Rafa is learning a few languages, Fijian, Hindi, French, and Tereo at school. He finds English the easiest and never hesitates to tell me that, "Daddy, your language is too tricky," or "I don't know what you're saying." He prefers the All Blacks haka or the Tongan sipitau to the Fijian dimbi. He's exposed to different religions and cultural practices. He knows they are different, but doesn't see the difference as problematic. He has an attitude of, "Oh, that's different, okay," and just gets on with it.
We've created a safe space for ourselves in which we can all be authentically who we want to be. I don't think twice about painting Rafa's fingernails when he asks. We were on campus one weekend and he saw a little girl riding a pink bike and he said, "Mama, when I grow into a big girl, I'm going to have a pink bike." And I stopped and I said, "Yes, Beta, when you're a big boy, you can have a pink bike." And he angrily said, "When I'm a big girl." So I apologized. "That's right, Rafa, you can be whoever you want to be. People will say, "Oh, when he has a girlfriend or a boyfriend," I retort quickly. Or when they hear we're from Fiji, they'll say, "Oh, he'll be a rugby player or a neurosurgeon," I say quickly.
Or that because both his parents have a PhD, that he'll be an academic.
I think he'll be a surfer, or he'll move to Spain and be an artist.
Or that he'll just go to Levuka and chill with his grandfather, pounding grog and tending to his vegetable garden, and then distributing the harvest on their way to pick up the Fiji Times from Gulab Das and Sons. Traditional gender roles are very blurred in our home. I can't remember the last time Vanisha did the laundry. We both are involved in taking care of Rafa. Vanisha lets him take risks, while I am a lot more cautious with him. And you can tell that he is more confident with her around. And you will only need to go to Vanisha's Insta stories to get a sense of what I'm talking about.
So I drive, Patrick doesn't, as in I can drive and he cannot. We aren't intentionally doing these things to make a point about gender. We're just not letting these things dictate how our family will function. We do what works and makes the most sense for us, even if it is a little different to the way everyone else is doing things.
Rafa is being raised in a space where we are letting him explore who he is and how he fits into the world. He's being raised in a space confidently and unapologetically, but respectful to always allow space for others. We're proud of him, but it hasn't been easy. We were new parents in a city where we had no family, not even my 14 grandparents or my countless number of aunties and uncles. But we had a loosely strung group of friends and an even looser sense of community.
So when Rafa was born, he went almost 2.5 days without being burped. Of course, in theory, I knew babies were winded, but it simply didn't occur to me to actually burp my baby. A midwife heard him crying and came in and instinctively knew what to do. And I looked at Patrick dumbfounded. I forgot to burp my baby. Were they really going to let me leave the hospital with him? Rafa left the hospital not rugged up enough, not even with a beanie. Thankfully, early on, I embraced the importance of talking about our failings, acknowledging that we simply did not know everything, and accepting the reality that we were doing it on our own. And slowly, I tried to stop being resentful about all the support we would have had from the 14 Tukais and Bumbus if we had been in Fiji, and tried to just get on with it.
This absence of a village or family to help, as hard as it was, allowed us to parent Rafa the way we wanted. The nature of our village is different. Instead of family showing us how to do things, we took a baby massage class to learn how to massage properly, or what my grandmothers would call vemasi or vembombo. Vanisha worked with a lactation consultant to help find the most comfortable positions to breastfeed Rafa. We worked with a sleep consultant to help develop healthy sleeping habits. And I learned not to expect Vanisha to know what to do with a baby and now a toddler just because she is simply his mother.
So society definitely expects women to parent like we don't have careers, while simultaneously expecting us to thrive in those careers like we don't have families. So Rafa attended his first consultancy meeting with me at just a few weeks old. I breastfed through the whole thing. I remember when he was just starting food, I was in a video conference and my colleagues could hear him gagging in the background. Mostly, Patrick and I tag team a lot. But one of my favorite memories and possibly the hardest moments of Dr. Mumming was when we were in Melbourne. I had a meeting in Sydney and Patrick already had a full day of meetings that he couldn't take Rafa to. So I took Rafa from Melbourne to Sydney for a 3-hour meeting. I had a lovely lady come to the office to look after him while I sat and contributed. Straight after the meeting, we headed back to the airport, called the last flight from Melbourne to Sydney, back to Sydney, and getting home after midnight. It was magical. I remember thinking and truly believing that I had done it, that I really was Dr. Mum. But the truth is, it's not just in those big events that make me Dr. Mum. I'm both those things every day. I don't think twice about having Rafa on my knee during a meeting or taking him to a research site.
In our home, it is not solely Vanisha as a woman being defined by our family, where she makes the sacrifices so that we can raise Rafa the way we want. Instead, all of us, including Rafa, are being shaped and defined by each other. We aren't striving for perfection or for balance. We're working towards flexible foundations, fluid identities, and a journey towards finding an all-encompassing sense of home within ourselves, defined by us, not limited by geography, culture, ethnicity, religion, or politics.
By embracing home and who we are within ourselves, we stop being reactive to the views of others about who they think we should be. We each act and are exactly who we need and want to be. It doesn't make for simple answers or explanations to that famously Fijian question of, "What are you?" But there isn't an ounce of doubt within each of us about who we are, what we stand for, and what home means to us. Thank you.